Yeah, we're live. Hey, everybody, what's going on? Thursday, we're getting close to the end. Can't wait for Friday. My camera obviously is already not cooperating. Let's see if it will keep doing that. Keep going there. Yay, I'm back. Maybe that's a new trick. Today, we're going to take a look at a video that I'm editing right now that I hopefully post tonight, if not first thing tomorrow morning. And I did a comparison on motors that I've run from Ford and Chevy and Dodge. Obviously, I've gotten wrecking yard motors, variations of all those. So we recently ran the 360 Dodge Magnum. I've also run a small block VORTEC Chevy and a 351 Windsor. So we have a 350, a 351, and a 360, which are all kind of right in the ballpark. I could not run them all with the factory fuel injection. I have run the Ford, the 351 Windsor with the factory fuel injection and an optimized tune and all that the way that we run usually with a Holley HP or something. And I've also run the Dodge that way, but I have not run the VORTEC Chevy like that. I've not run the spider injection that is on the small block Chevy. I've only run them carbureted. So I decided to compare them carbureted because I've run them all with dual plane intakes and 750 carburetors and long tube headers. So it's a good comparison because they're all basically junkyard versions of those motors. Although the one that I actually did the testing on the Magnum motor was the first one, because I've run both of them, was the Magnum, the Mopar Performance crate motor 360 Magnum, but it makes exactly the same power as the junkyard motor I have, and I've compared them back to back, and they're basically the same, which is not surprising given the fact that the Mopar Performance 300 horsepower Magnum is just a stock motor with that dual plane intake manifold on there. But I've run the Ford in exactly the same configuration and the small block Chevy in exactly the same configuration. So I'm doing that comparison now, and I'll be putting that up. So there's a lot of interesting information there. And then the question is, how does a 360-inch motor compare to a 351-inch motor compared to a 350-inch motor? So we have displacement. We also have differences in a lot of different things. We have different cylinder heads. We have different years. So basically, compared to the Ford, the Dodge and the Chevy both have more development time because they stopped the Ford early compared to the other two. They kept going in their development. And they introduced or replaced the 351 Windsor, the 5.8 liter, with the modular program, which I think was a mistake. They could have continued with that 351 because they had a lot of other good heads that they could have put on, a little more camshaft, the right intake manifold, and it certainly could have made a lot more power than it did. We saw a glimpse of that when they did the Lightning version of the 351 of the 5.8 liter, and it made 240 horsepower as opposed to 210 is what they were rated at on the Windsors. But so there's a lot more potential. The GT40 heads are not the equivalent of a Magnum head and not the equivalent of a VORTEC head, but they're certainly better than the standard passenger car head like the E7TE that they use in the 5-liter Mustangs and stuff. It basically needed a better head, and with a few more years of development, they could have made a version of that GT40 head that was certainly better. I mean, the aluminum GT40 and GT40X heads, and those were better. So if they would have made a good iron version of that, which they easily could have, then they could have stepped up their game quite a bit and then kept pace with the rated power outputs of the Magnum and of the VORTEC Chevy, which all of those are really good. It can be argued that the VORTEC Chevy was kind of the high watermark for the standard small block. They made more power when they went to, which is, a Gen 2 small block, when they went to the LT1 stuff, which was an outgrowth of the VORTEC. But I think a lot of guys would argue that that's kind of a different motor because it has a different block and it has reverse cooling and stuff. So, and it requires dedicated cylinder heads and stuff. So the VORTEC stuff is kind of the last hurrah of the conventional small block Chevy. And the same thing with the Magnum, I know it's a different engine family, but a lot of the stuff carries over from the LA version. As a matter of fact, we ran an LA front cover on the Magnum when we were doing a lot of the testing, when I ran intake manifolds and all kinds of stuff. So a lot of the stuff carries over between the two. You can interchange the heads and stuff. Obviously, the intake manifold has a different bolt pattern, but they will physically bolt on and the ports will line up and stuff. So all of that works. it's an interesting comparison. And then, so the next question obviously is, when after we compare these and see what they do naturally aspirated, the next question is which one of those do you think will take the most boost? Of the three of those, the only ones I've run boost on the VORTEC stuff, but not a lot. We have run lots of boosts on a 351 Windsor, so I know when we do it in big bang configuration, when we do, when we put ring gap in the stock pistons, clean everything up, put good heads on it, put good head studs and gaskets on it, and put a cam in it, put an intake manifold on it, and then run boost into that, which we've done, and run lots of boost. You're going into 4-digit power levels. I don't know how long it's going to last like that, and I don't know how. I think the last time I did that with the Big Bang 351 Windsor, we didn't show what that thing could really do. I broke it being dumb rather than the thing losing, strength from what we were doing if we were doing it correctly. And if I redid it, we would do it differently. But we know that it will make 1,000 horsepower because we've already done that. So the question is, will the small block Chevy make that kind of power, at least the bottom end? I think that it will. I think if we take a VORTEC short block and put ring gap in it, and then put good heads and cam and intake, I think we're going to make fairly good power. We're going to make somewhere probably 400-ish or low 400. Same thing with the Dodge. And then we can put boost on that and make some fairly big numbers at some reasonable boost levels. By the time you're at 20 pounds, you're probably getting to 4-digit power levels, the low 20s. So I don't know how far they'll go. If anybody has pushed these Magnum motors, the block and stuff, especially the short block, the stock, usually it's not the block that lets go, and usually it's not the crank either. Even a cast crank, they will make a lot of power. You can make lots of runs on them, and the cranks won't let go. I've never broken a crankshaft from just power. We usually, in the big bang things, will break the rods or the piston. And obviously lots of guys are breaking pistons because of ringland, and that's not unusual, especially when you look at the Hemi stuff. That's all over the place. The lack of tuning, and then the weak pistons, and then no ring gap. Those all combine to destroy lots and lots of motors. And you find those when I ordered my intake manifold and got it in the mail. Good thing I shook it before I put it on. It was like shaking maracas, man. There was all kinds of broken piston parts in there. It took 5 cleanings to get everything out of there, because when it goes in, then it doesn't want to come out because of the design of the intake. It doesn't just empty out nicely because of the way that the plenum is designed and stuff. It was no picnic. But I digress. But on the small blocks, it would be interesting to see. I mean, it would be cool just to run boost on the thing that I'm worried about with the Magnum. Running boost on that is running it on the Kager intake manifold. I'm not so much worried about the intake manifold, but the throttle assembly. So I have to make some sort of bonnet work on that. And I think that correct me if I'm not wrong, there's not one on my motor, but I thought that there was a bridge that went over the top of the 2-barrel factory throttle body that has a center threaded area that we can put a center bolt or threaded rod in there, and then that way we can attach kind of a conventional blow through deal, like a bonnet for a carburetor. And if that's the case, then that would make life easy. And I think that it is. And even if it's not, that's something that I could make. We could make that very quickly. The small block Chevy stuff is not a problem, and we obviously on the Dodge, we could also do it with a conventional carbureted intake and or the EFI version, because the guys from Hughes, I think, make an RPM air gap that's a carburetor or a blow through EFI version or an EFI version, and we could blow through that very easily. And we could also blow through a carbureted version, just put our CSU carburetor on top of a dual plane, which on a dual plane you can blow through that as well, and then run boost from a turbo and kind of see what happens. I'm going to run boost on the Magnum anyway, because I haven't done that yet. So that's definitely in the cards. Saul, thank you very much. Master, obviously Ford Windsor is way better than all the others, so it splits in half. Well, the nice thing is a 351 Windsor won't split in half. That reputation is actually from the 5-liter Ford, from the 302 version. The 351 Windsor doesn't have that reputation. And like I said, we've done lots of 4-digit stuff on the 351 Windsor, and it works pretty well. and can make a lot of power. I like the 351 as an upgrade to the 302 because the 351 has more displacement, so it's already going to make more power. And then it can take advantage of what a lot of the cylinder heads that are available for the 5-liter have to offer. Because if you put a set of Airflow Research 165, 185, 205, especially 205 heads on there, you're talking about heads that can support 300 or 600 NA horsepower. So it's going to be really hard to get a small block or a 302, a 5-liter, to take advantage of what that head has to offer. You're more likely to get that out of a 351, put a good size cam in it. Then the limitation with a 351 becomes the available piston, the valve clearance in a stock piston, but you can always notch it like we did when we did the Big Bang thing. But the Dodge thing, I'm looking forward to running boost on, and I also want to run boost on the small block Chevy on the VORTEC motor. I want to do it with a VORTEC head, and a VORTEC head and mild cam, because a lot of guys have that, and they would be inclined to keep that head on there because you can make pretty good power with that head. So we can run boost on that, and then you could start with something around 400 horsepower maybe with a good camshaft in a VORTEC, as long as you do the springs and or guides on the VORTEC head. Put a carbureted intake manifold on it, put a 4-barrel on it, blow through that with a turbo, and you're making good power. And then the thing that's going to stop you with if you select the kegger intake for a Dodge Magnum is that it's going to limit where the thing wants to make power. The kegger is a really long runner deal, and it will limit how much RPM or where you can make power at. So you're limited to making lots and lots of torque. So if that's what you want to do, that's a good way to do it. Put a small-ish turbo on there and get good boost response. Run that kegger, run a small cam, and all of a sudden you've got something that's acting a lot more like a diesel motor than it is, a high RPM peak power thing. Obviously, for the Big Bang things, that's not what we want. We don't want 25 pounds of boost with peak torque happening at 3,500 or 4,000 RPM. We want to have a motor that will rev to 6,500 or more RPM and make peak power out there, and then kind of have a rising curve, more like a centrifugal, if we're doing that. So what do you guys think? What do you think, or do you guys have any experience with any of these small blocks, either the Magnum or the Ford Windsor or the VORTEC Chevy? Do you have any experience with those running lots and lots of power? Like guys pinch a top ring line and then say X boost is the max. Yeah. They used to say that I remember them saying that with the connecting rods on the 4.6 2-valve and 4-valve motors too, the modular Fords, and also with the Hondas. Oh, you can't run boost on the B16 because the piston breaks or the rod breaks. I'm like, yeah, the piston will definitely break, but it's not breaking because the piston's not right. It's breaking because you don't have any ring gap in it. And the Honda ring gaps were fairly tight. So it's not going to be happy. It wasn't designed to run boost. It's designed as an NA motor. And if you put ring gap in them, we ran a lot of boost. I mean, we ran 25 pounds on the stock piston. So you can do that. And again, the boost doesn't matter. It's the power output that you're doing. So we ran 25 pounds on a modified motor that made pretty good power. So let's see what's going on with you guys. Why are Porsche parts so expensive? Yes, they are very much so. Why are Dodge parts so expensive compared to Chevy? That's probably also true. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen them continue the development of the 351 Windsor. There's obviously a lot more power to be had in that thing, and they certainly could have got it up where the other guys were, where the Dodge guys were, the Chevy guys were. Julian, I have a blown up TBI 305 and have a good 350 VORTEC. Can I make the TBI work, or should I? You should go with the carburetor definitely on that. The throttle body injection is definitely going to be limited. ES restorations. I have an LS1 twin turbo. Should I run pump gas, non-ethanol 94 octane, or should I run E85? Definitely E85. How do you know if there's too much back pressure caused by a turbo? Well, what is your power output and what is your boost level and what is your NA power output? It can give you a fairly good idea. And the best way to do it, obviously, is to measure it. Do you think a 408 stroker Mopar Magnum turbo can hit 1,000 horsepower? Yes, without any problem at all. It can make the number. I don't know how long it's going to last like that and how long you can run it sustained like that. But if you're putting together a 408, there's a good chance that you're putting a steel crank in there and forged rods and forged pistons. So the rotating assembly should be fine. Even if you have a cast crank, I think the rotating assembly is going to be fine. Then you have to start thinking about, okay, I've got forged rods and forged pistons. Now, what is the weak thing? Is it the cast crank that I chose? Or if you chose the steel crank, then it's probably the block. But 1,000 horsepower, I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking that the Magnum motor can probably take that. 351 Windsor for towing. High lift, low duration cam using the small streetable heads for max efficiency. AFR 165s on a 350. Well, an AFR 165 you could make 550 horsepower with, so that's not a problem. AFR 255s are too big for towing. No, they're not. That's not you won't make any more torque with the 165 over a 185. Maybe at 2,000 RPM, but probably not. Not at wide open throttle. At part throttle, you might see something. And I don't think that you're going to need to go with a high lift, low duration camshaft. That's going to be unstable. I think you're going to go with a medium lift or even a low lift cam that's going to be low duration. The Ford W will make the best horsepower without boost, so I guess we know who the winner will be. That's probably not true. BMW parts are also expensive, but not like Porsche parts, I don't think. Larry, VORTEC heads, flat top forge, LS6 springs, mild cam would be very interesting. Yeah, because if you have a, depending on what camshaft that is, that's probably making fairly decent power to start out with. So we know if we add 14.5 pounds, we could double the power output of whatever that is. How do you put a 460 into a first-gen Boxer? Very gently. What trans do I use? I don't know what you're going to be using for that. Does anybody have any recommendations for Morty? Are you for a 460 in a Boxster? Purple Monkey, you want to use brake clean? I think that'd be fairly expensive for chemical intercooling. And also it's fairly unstable. Yeah, Dan, I was amazed when my friend Bernie, who is a crew chief for the guys at Osco, and I remember him telling me when they would go to the Porsche trailer, they'd have motors there that people could buy like for the 24 hours of Daytona, and they were just ridiculously priced. Jeff, he did a junkyard 351 Windsor, twin turbo. Oh, 2 turbo coupe turbos. Those are really small, 2 T3s. Less than $1,500, around 1150s at 118 and 6 pounds of boost. Nice. $1,000 crank is 10,000. PFI Speed just did a bone stock Hemi with a turbo and a little truck. I've run bone stock ones too. We didn't even take it apart and put ring gap in. I did that for hot rod, and I think we were only around on a 5.7. I'm thinking we were around 600 or 650 or something. We didn't run very much boost, but when we did the Big Bang, that was still all the stock bottom end, but we did put ring gap in it, and then it made way over 1,000. What turbo should I put my 302? It just depends on the power level. 530 is not really high lift for an LS cam. An LS cam would be 600 or 610 or 620 or something like that. All the 500 lift stuff and even the 550 lift stuff. The 550 is, yeah, kind of mid lift maybe. And you can use the Oldsmobile Tornado trans. Best horsepower mod for a 289 slant 6. A camshaft probably. And then the intake. Dukes, what size turbos are you thinking about testing on the Magnum? I'm going to run the turbos that I have. I have to choose from. I'm sure Freiberger would allow me to use his S480 if I wanted. I have an S475. I have the 7875 Gen 2 from Viren or VS Racing. I have the GT45. I have a a pair of GT35s from Max Speeding. I have a pair of 3076s from Max Speeding. I also have a Force Performance. I think it's a 78, 76. I have to verify that with Robert, but it's one that we ran on the K Series Honda. Brian, are all these engines stock you want to compare? I have already run all of them. I ran the 351 and the Dodge and the Chevy, and I'm working on the video now. If you get your hands on an E-Gate from TurboSmart, can you think of any tests you'd like to do for videos? I just want to see the thing in action and demonstrate how it works. A K20 or a K24 911 would actually be pretty good. My GT45 eBay turbo, ours was from DNA, but they sell lots of different places. Mine has been really reliable. We've used the heck out of it, and then we just throw it on the ground and then pick it up the next time and reuse it again, and it's worked a lot. We just ran it on the as a hybrid on the 3800 with a not hybrid, as a compound. Can I run a small shot of nitrous once in a while on my stock 5.9 Magnum? Yeah, we just ran nitrous on the junkyard one, and we didn't even do it correctly the way that you should. What's the best power upgrade for a 4.5 liter Cadillac Alante? Probably nitrous. I don't know what. I don't. Do they have program? Do they have chips for those and programming and stuff? Ooh, Dan, you got a GT2. Those are nice. Yeah, 351 Cleveland definitely makes lots of power. Too bad they don't make them anymore. Yeah, that would be a good way, Dan, is to LS swap the Alante. That would make a lot more power. Is it true GM produced more overall LS Gen 3 engines than they did the classic small block from 55 to 96? So how long have they been running the LS? 2000 to 2020? I don't know. I find that hard to believe. You're talking about a 40-year run. No, that's a 40-year run of small blocks, and they used them in everything, in all the trucks and all the cars and stuff. So I don't know. You'd have to look at production numbers to see, but it would surprise me if that's the case. How long runners for an exhaust manifold have you seen where it starts to hinder performance? There's probably, I don't know what the trade-off is going to be between a long tube header, which typically adds power to the NA version, and then the decrease in lag from having the, added length of the runner and having some of the heat dissipate and stuff. I don't know what that trade-off is going to be, but wrapping it would definitely help. And judging by how well the remote stuff works, even when it's really long, the distance from the exhaust port, if you will, to the turbo, they still work pretty well. Yeah, a Ferrari Testarossa is a cool car. and the 512 even more so. I don't know about the Dodges. Does anybody know? Did any of the LA motors, like maybe the 340 6-pack or something, or any of the Magnums, ever come as 4-bolt mains? Oh, 97 on the LS, yeah. I was thinking trucks. Staying on Niner, else one question. How large a camshaft can you run with minimal low-end loss over stock? I like to shift at 6,500, idle with the AC on, no cam surge. So I want a stock cam, but it has to make like 70 or 80 more horsepower than the stock cam. You're not going to find that. At wide open throttle, that's not terribly difficult to do, but it's definitely going to drive differently. The 54 459-11 will definitely be cammy in an LS1. Yes, a rising boost curve for the big bang stuff is preferred because we don't want a big torque number, which is usually what breaks stuff. So if we have a rising curve, we can have a big G-whiz peak power number and then not have the broken parts until we get a really big G-whiz peak power number. Single plane is a good way to go. Short runner, EFI manifold, same thing. We didn't do that on any of the original big bang stuff until we went to the, I think we did that with the first 6-liter and the first and second 6-liter. I think we ran a high ram on one of them on the Gen 3, and then on the Gen 4 we ran a race sniper, which are not ideal choices for those. On the previous ones we ran the fast manifold, which is the best one for power, but it also makes really good torque. There were no 4-bolt small block Mopars. Okay. Lewis, I'm ready to come. I thought you guys forgot about me. I'm ready to play in traffic, man. Anytime. If you were to dyno tune for a torque limit on a 5.3 turbo with a stage 2 truck cam, what would you think of rising boost curve to flatten the torque at 700 pounds for a Gen 3 800 pounds? Well, we're looking more at like 1,000 foot-pounds, and like on the 6-liter stuff, it was 1,300 foot-pounds. So 700 foot-pounds, I wouldn't worry about that too much on a 5.3, even on a Gen 3, as long as you have ring gap. Morty, I sent text to him. He apparently is not interested in talking to me, so I don't know what to do about that. He's still Tom Cruise on the couch jumping around mad, so I don't know what his deal is. Yeah, I think I did, Tim. I think I did run a high ram on the Gen 3 6-liter, and then we ran a Holly Race Sniper on the Gen 4 one. Both of them short runner deals. Oh yeah, I just got a message from, man, that's sad. Ah, that's terrible. So what would you say for limit for torque? For track use, I don't know. For the drag strip, I don't think you're going to limit it. I think you'd be more worried about the transmission than anything. Are the TBI generation 87 to 92 LA318 cylinder heads better for a mild performance build than pre-TBI? I don't know. I'm not really the guy to ask about that. I'm not that familiar with the. I didn't think that there was a big difference in any of the LA318 cylinder heads, but I'm not the guy to ask about it. I would go to Dulcich and find out. If you had a nicely responsive turbo, would going to a short runner like a Hiram be a good alternative to a large turbo? No, it won't. It won't affect it. The runner length is only going to determine where the motor wants to make power. The short runners want to make power at higher engine speeds, and the longer runners want to make power at lower engine speeds. So it doesn't matter what turbo you have on there; it's still going to want to do that. Lawrence, you can use a turbo off of a diesel from the wrecking yard. That's been done for a long time. Any turbo really from any turbo car you can put on another car and it works. It's just that now turbos are so inexpensive online that you can get new ones for about that same price. Richard, have you ever tested any budget LS aftermarket heads against the more expensive AFR? I don't know what you mean by budget. If you look at the videos I put up, we tested like 30 or 40 sets of LS heads. So I think we got a pretty good example of what all the heads do. Do you see any need for titanium connecting rods? I had them on my Acura NSX when I had it, so I thought that was really cool. I could tell people about it, and obviously they work, but not for most. Not for any kind of street car, I wouldn't think. Ring gap is one of the keys to long engine life. Obviously, tune is also a big part of it, but you have to have you have to have enough ring gap where the rings don't butt together, because if the rings butt together, it snaps the ring line off the piston, and then your party's over. Then it's no fun. Without that, I've seen guys get away with it for a while, but it's much better if you have ring gap in it. What would a safe amount of nitrous be for a 351 with a stock bottom end? You could easily run 100 shot. We ran 100 shot on my 5-liter. I don't know. We went through 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 bottles. I don't know how much it was. It was a lot. What's going on with dart block availability? I don't know anything about that. The ring gap doesn't depend on boost level. A lot of people try to equate that. They say, "Oh, you can run this much boost on a stock motor." You can't run that much boost for a long period of time, put a whole bunch of heat in the ring gap, and then expect it not to break. It's actually ring heat is what you're talking about, and there's not a direct correlation between boost and heat, because a lot of other things can affect it. Julius, what's going on? There should be Barra stuff at VORTEC. I'll have to check and see. Carbon fiber rods. I'd like to see that work. Yeah, it'd be hard to argue that a 351 has better head selection than a small block Chevy, but there is a lot for them. Jeff, again, also that those don't correlate. The amount of miles that you have on it are not a direct correlation with ring gap, because if you take a look at, like, if you take a good example, I haven't measured the ring gap yet, but if you take a look at the Magnum that I just run, or almost any of the Fords that I've taken apart, and most modern engines, or a lot of them, if we could take them apart with 100 or 200,000 miles, they still have crosshatch in them. So, and there's no big groove at the top. So it's not wearing. The cylinder's not really wearing very much. So everybody thinks, oh yeah, it just wears, and then the rings just spread out. Well, if you can still see crosshatch in it, it hasn't worn very much. And so I've seen motors that have 200,000 miles on them that still have like ring gap in the teens on the LS stuff. So that's not enough to run lots of boost just because it has lots of miles on it. Does the Atlas motor use a standard GM bell housing? No, it does not. I got an adapter from EM Tech. Is that it? Is that where Mark's from? EM Tech? I think it is. He makes an adapter to allow you to adapt the unique Atlas pattern to a small block pattern. I'm thinking about getting a Super Duty 5.4, but want more power. Could I use similar mods to a 4.6.2 valve? Yeah, the mods on the things that you're going to do to the modular motor will work on both of those. It needs boost, really. Yeah, your 6.2 at 13,000s. I've seen them that low. It's really it's really tight. Yeah, the old school blocks, like I remember taking the first time I took a small block Chevy apart in my Camaro. I remember taking it apart. I'm like, how? My dad's like, we got to take the pistons out. Well, I'm like, do we take the pistons out of the bottom? He said, no, they come out the top. I said, well, they're not going to come out of the top of this block, because it had like, it had like this much like ridge around the top of it because it had worn that much. And so you got to get out the old ridge reamer, which I didn't know about at the time. And you got to spin the thing around to cut the ridge off so you can get the piston out. And that is a lot of wear, and that would have a lot of ring gap. The modern stuff doesn't seem to do that, though. Gary wants to know why 500 plus horsepower small block runs a 950 Holly. That's the biggest one we had, and if we're trying to make lots of power on the dyno, that's the carburetor that we would use. Honestly, I think we were making on the one that you're talking about, I think it made like 530 or 540 or something. I might try a 950 on there. I might also try an 850. Because an 850 might drive better. Although in that particular combination, I think it had a 294 cam in it. So it had a pretty big cam in it. It's not going to be terribly drivable anyway, but a 950 might make just as much. Although the bigger carburetor might make 5 or 10 more on the dyno, but the other one would still drive better. So then in that case, you'd have to choose between those two. Let's talk turbo. All that carbon above the ring lands. A 950 Ultra XP would be a good choice for a 496. That would definitely work. Yeah, what we're doing on the engine dyno obviously is not the same as street driving, where you're not doing lots of part throttle stuff on the dyno and drivability. They do more of that on the chassis dyno, but it ultimately out on the street is where you're going to figure out whether or not it's working. Once the Dakota bell housing is figured out, once we make the adapter plate, I would love to see a test of a 2.5 versus 2.2. Yeah, just to see the difference in power between those two. Unfortunately, my 2.5 has the later head on it. The dyno doesn't load the motor like a trans brake would. Yeah, I will get going on the Nova again. Yeah, the 2.5, especially in a car that you're driving on the street, is going to be a lot torqueier. I mean, it's bigger. So right off the bat, it's going to be better, which again is going to be multiplied by, hey, look, I've got a bigger motor. I'm making more low speed power. I'm going to now have better turbo response. So not only do I have the extra torque from it being bigger, but now theoretically you can have also extra torque from whatever that increase in boost response was that the 2.2 doesn't have. And this especially comes into play, not so much on a stock turbo, because they're both going to have fairly good boost response. But if you go up in turbo sizing because you want to make 300, 400, 500 horsepower, then the extra displacement is really going to be noticeable, because it's definitely going to spool it up. It bigger is going to spool it up quicker. GLH project easily make 500 horsepower. I don't think easily and 500 on the 2.2 go together. I was really excited that it started up, though. That was enough for me. It was really cool. What grade of oil is recommended for a stock 5.9 Magnum using a small shot of nitrous casing? I run 530 in almost everything. Have you done any testing on manifolds on the cheaper brands? Yeah, we have done some on the Edelbrock RPM air gap seems to be the kind of standard of the industry. We've tested some of the other stuff where it's really good, but it's engine specific. It's not just universal. Julius, there's no problem converting a dual plane to EFI. The only concern you have is just to make sure that you get. A lot of guys are concerned with having a fuel rail that goes all the way across where the injectors are all even. Sometimes the port doesn't lend itself to that. But you can also have a staggered, depending on how you machine it, you can have a staggered fuel rail. And so that's usually the concern. But from a performance standpoint, it will work just fine. It'll work just like a dual plane does. On a 500-inch Mopar, I pulled off a 950 and put a 1000. Yeah, on a big block, especially a 500-inch one, we would definitely put the biggest 4150 on there. And probably on a 500-inch one, we would look at doing a Dominator. Sometimes the junkyard motors get whatever the junkyard oil was. If they still left some in there, sometimes for our startup, we would do that. It's usually really, really black. Do you have a favorite low buck aluminum head for a small block? I haven't tested enough of the low buck stuff. I think I've only tried Speedmaster stuff in terms of the low dollar stuff. I haven't tried the Enforcer head yet, which I'd like to, and I haven't tried any of the Skip Whites or any of those, so I'm not sure which ones to choose. Does Holly still make a strip Dominator? For which application? For a small block? All right, Julius, take it easy, man. So Dan, you chatted with a friend who does combustion R&D for the OEM. He was lamenting on better quality chambers, requiring less timing, and more torque because of the position of the crank angle. Cool. No chassis dyno access in the future for the 7 p.m. Holdner crew. I don't understand that. Less timing gets the piston down the board at similar pressures. So are you saying that the peak cylinder pressure is going to occur at a different piston position? I have not run a 352 Ford FE. I've not run any FE. Well, I haven't built one and put it on the dyno. I did some stuff way back with Robert Pond on stack injection on some sort of real high dollar aluminum 427 base stroker that he had. But I wasn't really part of the, he did all the work. The Slat 6 is sitting in my storage right now. It's ready just to be put back together because the head's all done. GM combustion engineers are, yeah, I would imagine that they're really sharp. On a 4-valve, is a long runner and short runner better than a variable runner? So you're wanting to have one of each? I don't think that would be ideal. Yeah, we like the thumbs downs too, Beagle, because it's counted as the same. Somebody obviously I made mad at some point, and so they're continuing to do that, I guess. Peak cylinder pressure at better rod angles. A 2-valve and solid roller cam VORTEC small block 350 single big turbo estimate. So there's so many things there that I don't know. I don't know what you mean by big. I don't know what cam you're talking about. I don't know what intake is on it. I don't know what the compression is. I don't know what the fuel is. There's a lot of stuff. So I'll say it's going to be somewhere between 400 horsepower and like 4,000, but probably shy of the 4,000 number. Would love to see a blueprint small block with a turbo. Yeah, we ran the Chad's motor made over 1,000 horsepower with a blower on it. Morty Westec has a chassis dyno, but I don't understand why we wouldn't be able to go on the chassis dyno. Did you ever get an office space? I don't have an office space. I already have run a 400M. I did a whole series of testing on that. The video is up, or the videos are up. Tom, you did have to go in timeout. You're getting a little rambunctious. You know, maybe you're hydrating. So Morty, you haven't seen testing on it? Is that what you're talking about? Have you watched the videos? We've done a couple of videos over there with guys running some very cool things on the chassis dyno. I have not run boost on the Magnum yet. So you've been porting your Magnum heads, Okie speed. So Tom, you're feral basically. So you're Brian. You're picking the 350 VORTEC. It is a good motor. There's no doubt about that. The whole fuel mileage thing is a difficult deal. You have to look at the EPA estimates to kind of get an idea of what they can do, because what they have the potential to do and what they actually do are determined by people's driving habits, and that can vary. That can cut it by 50% or more. All the Magnum heads are iron. So to give you guys an idea on the video that I'm doing, the Dodge Magnum is rated at, the 5.9 Magnum is rated at 245 horsepower and 235 foot-pounds. The L31 350 is rated at 255 horsepower, but 330 foot-pounds. And the Ford 351 Windsor is rated at 210 horsepower and 325 foot-pounds. So now you can redo your estimates. An Ardent head Hemi flathead. That's definitely other guys. Darren, what kind of superchargers do you want to see on a 5.9 Magnum? I wonder if Dulcich has ever run like a Torque Storm or something. And I know that we've both done the Torque Storm on the Hemis, but I don't think I've done one on a Magnum. Or I haven't done one. I wonder if he has. Benjamin, I actually wanted to do, when I started this comparison video today, I actually wanted to compare the 360 LA motor that I had and the 360 Magnum. The problem is I ran the LA motor so long ago that I can't overlay the graphs because it was on the older software for Windyne. And so they won't interchange. They won't talk to each other. So I can't overlay those graphs. Jason, I would agree with Gail there. I don't think it's ever a percentage, because the other thing that's changing that a lot of guys don't realize is that the way that we run it on the engine dyno, it has most of the time has no accessories on it. It has an open exhaust. So those things right there are going to change the amount of power, not as a percentage, as a fixed amount. And then the transmission that you use. So if you say, okay, I have this motor and I made this much on the engine dyno, and now I put it in a chassis dyno. If you put a Ford 9-inch in it and 35-inch tires on it and a big steel drive shaft and let's say a turbo 400 trans with a loose converter on it, the amount of power that thing makes to the wheels is going to be dramatically different as if you put a manual trans, a carbon fiber drive shaft, an 8.8 or an 8-inch converter, and a typical 15 or 16-inch tire on it. It's going to make dramatically different power at the tire. And so the percentage number is going to be the same. So it's actually the parts that you're using behind the engine. And then also, like I talked about, the changes that you're making to the engine itself. Is it running hotter now in the car? Does it have a fan attached to it? Does it have other accessories? Is the exhaust exactly the same? There's a lot of things that are changing that have nothing to do with this percentage thing. Yeah, bust out the graph paper. I could hand draw it and that would work. Yes, idle time is not adding MPG, it's definitely taken away. Yeah, I could put all of the information into plotting software, and I could put all the raw numbers in and then redo it. It just would look different than it all has. What exactly is piston flipping? Uh-oh, now he's going to open up a can of worms. That's just changing the pin offset, because the factory pistons, like the Magnum that we tested it on, has pin offset. So when you flip the piston around to the other side, it changes the pin offset from the major to the minor side. No, I did not run that, and that's what I talked about, Dan. I can't run the spider injection. I haven't yet. I haven't run any of the L31 VORTEC small block Chevys with that injection on it. I've only run them as carbureted ones. So in this comparison that I'm doing now, I ran all of them carbureted. I ran the 360 Magnum and the 351 Windsor and all with dual planes and carburetors and long tube headers. Well, Morty, we reused our oil, so we made sure that we had the right oil. The 351 Windsor needs a lot of things. It needs a camshaft. It needs head flow. Obviously, it needs an intake manifold. It just needs a lot of stuff. So, Mike, you're a Chevy guy, and you know that the 351 Windsor is better than the 350 VORTEC. So, what about the Ford is better than that Chevy? What's the fuel that's used in the movie cars? You mean the ones that explode all the time? That's called C4. Yeah, you can just put LS heads right on your Windsor. They just bolt right on and with no problems at all, and you don't have to figure out anything else out. A Ford 250 inline six. I've never even worked on one of those. There was one that a guy had. I think his was a 230 though, that had a turbo and stuff on it. He had an aluminum head and all kinds of crazy stuff on his, but I haven't actually worked on one of those. I don't know how much ultimate power that the Windsor block can handle. We've done, I think we did 1100 or something with it. $1,800 RPM max torque 351 Windsor. I disagree with that. I think I might rather have the extra 9 cubic inches. So, Dan, I haven't looked at the L31s in great detail. What can we run regular injectors in some of those intake manifolds? I've only ever seen the spider ones that have the silly nozzles on them and stuff. Do they have the L31s that have real injectors in them? A Whipple charger on a 5.9 Magnum that replaces the intake manifold. Yeah, you're going to have to design your own manifold for that. That'd be hard to do. I just want to see the Magnum not blow head gasket. We did. Ours ran good. Oh, the movie Cars. Okay, I see. I thought he was talking about the ones that blow up on all the car movies. I know, Tim. 1800 is below the flash speed of the stock converter, but the important thing is that you have to go from off idle to, to wide open throttle, apparently, on the engine dyno to do the testing. You got to see how hard it hits the converter. Chris, we'll talk about any subject. My stock L67 supercharged 3800 gets around 4 to 5 degrees of knock retard at times. Is that bad? Yeah, you should try to increase the octane of the fuel you're using, or try to make sure that you get cold air to it to see if you can cure that. BorgWarner has individual injectors to replace the spider poppet valves. Do you really lose E85 ability if adding a supercharger in a stock LQ9? Or why would you lose the ability to run E85? What you need, if you have a stock fuel system, you probably need more fuel pump and more injector to run a supercharger, and then especially to run E85, because you're going to need more fuel supply. But I don't know why you don't have that ability. You're going to have to tune it also for that. I don't know what the maximum power on a Mopar block is. What? Who's Rob Dahm and what does he do? Somebody asked me about him before. It's going to be hard to find a Corvair Spider turbo motor in the wrecking yard. So if it has knock retard in high gear at light throttle, that's probably tuned. Then they probably have too much timing. What's the lowest RPM? I think the lowest I've ever run is 2000. I haven't even been looking for a Ford 6.2 at the wrecking yard. Rob does rotary stuff. I would like to do some rotary stuff. 1 minute left. Yeah, I was at West Benjamin. I was at WestTech when they did compressed air supercharging. The guys from compressed air superchargers, Dale and Carl, ran I think that they ran a small block when they were there, and it worked really well. Adventure, you're looking for something small. Look at a 260. 256, 262 kind of comp cams catalog thing, and it should work good. Corey, lots of people sell air fuel meters. That's all it is. Innovate sells them. AEM sells them. Lots of guys have them. The compressed air tanks were gigantic. So these guys are saying a clogged EGR valve on the 3800 can cause knock at light load also. Or even Tony going to duke it out? Dan, if you do a search for it, just do a search for compressed air supercharging with Jeff Smith, and all of that will come up. I'm sure Jeff probably covered the pressure in the compressed air and then what they reduced it down to, because I think that they only ran. I don't think they ran a lot of boost. I don't think that they had to. I think that they were doubling the power at 7 pounds, and I know that they've run that thing up to 800 or 900 horsepower on that thing. And they were just running, they're running like NA timing. They also ran it on regular like 87 octane and stuff. So they did some really crazy things. So is Rob the guy that brought the Turbo C5, the rotary, to LS Fest? Am I thinking about the right guy? Morty, I don't think there's anything to worry about with that. Yeah, I don't want to get kicked by a kangaroo. Oh, the C5 LS Fest, okay. Thanks, Jose. I need to talk to my guy Steve. I don't know what the next round of testing is going to be. Probably more Mopar stuff. Probably more a lot of. I'm thinking I need to do boost. I think I have a cam coming from the UT Awesome guys, so we'll run the kegger with that camshaft. The guys at Speedmaster said that they would let me use a set of their iron heads, so I have those to pick up. I think that there was a set of aluminum heads, also an intake manifold. When I was down there doing the stuff with Engine Masters, Dulcich had, like, we tested an RPM air gap versus the M1 dual plane, and he also had a Speedmaster one, but they didn't want to add that to the test. I kind of wish that we would have to find out how it did. Yeah, if they ran an 05 Hemi and didn't put ring gap in it, it's and they broke it at 900, that doesn't surprise me. A dual plane does work with EFI. Now, look at the guys from Hughes have a dual plane EFI intake manifold that they sell for the Dodge Magnum. It's an RPM air gap, basically. I have too many projects, actually. And on that note, I have to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow. We'll take a look and see. You guys can place your bets and see who does the best on the 350 versus the 351 versus the 360. So let me know what you guys think, man. I will see you all tomorrow.